Björn Bracke hat sein Büro in Belgien. Bracke Kollektif Landscape wurde 2021 gegründet. Björn Bracke ist Mitgründer des Büros in Gent in Belgien und neben seiner Tätigkeit im Büro ist Björn auch in der Forschung tätig an der University KU in Leuven. Wir werden jetzt auch gleich auf Englisch wechseln. Björn, you will do your talk in English. And the topic of the lecture series, Matters of Care, Matters of Land, should give different sides or should explain an approach to different sides from a perspective that you really take into account what is already there. Working with the existing, try to make transitions, but always taking into account these existing conditions. Vielleicht noch kurz zum Ablauf des Abends. Wir werden jetzt den Vortrag hören, circa 45 Minuten. Es gibt dann die Möglichkeit, auch Fragen zu stellen und im Anschluss auch noch die Möglichkeit für einen ganz informellen Austausch draußen an der Bar. Dann Dankeschön mal fürs zahlreiche Kommen und Björn, thanks for sharing your work.
Okay, thank you very much and good evening everyone. Thanks for this invitation. I will quickly change for presentation. Okay, maybe before I start, maybe nice to know how many of you, who is landscape architect? Like, okay, so pretty much all of the room. That's good. Just to know how kind we have to be towards the other professions, etc. So no, it's nice to have this exchange, to share some of experience. We're a very young office. We try to combine research, build work, mostly in Belgium, also a bit abroad, but I think also looking forward to have your ideas and comments on what we are trying to do. The title of the talk is Cultivating Urban Biotopes. Yeah, just to try to grasp somehow what we try to do. The biotope is about biodiversity, trying to work with nature. The cultivating is some sort of interesting way of trying to deal how we can integrate this nature into built projects, into the social and material realm, let's say. Before we start, maybe our office. So we are an office based in Ghent, as Jürgen explained. Collective Landscape, we were founded only 4 years ago. This will be our 5th birthday. But of course, many people know there is no such thing as the birth of an office. There are many endeavors and projects that we did in the past 15 years after studies that lead a bit to the culmination of this built work. We are now a team of about 10 to 13 people and a very nice group that is, of course, also responsible for a lot of the work that I will be sharing today. Maybe to start with this graph that maybe is a bit the lens with which we are looking to the projects today, where you can see on the one hand, so on the left, you can see the populations, and there are 2 types of populations. It's the human populations on top, so it's the blue curve, and then you have the overall animal populations below, which is the black curve, and it goes from the 1970s until today. So, of course, what do we learn from this curve? On the one hand, you can see the decline of almost 70% of the animal species in only 50 years. So it's about populations, it's not about species, sorry, so the populations. And then on the other hand, you have this human population that keeps growing. So, and this of course has a history. If we go back in time, there is a longer history of extinction of animal species on the globe. And on the other hand, there's of course also, this curve will not come, this curve will continue, and we are living in an age of extinction, and it really challenges to think about our place as human beings on the planet. And Many people and famous authors have thought about this topic, and one of the things, and I'm sure Marcel also talked about this, is some sort of friction between nature and culture, of the dichotomy, where people like Philippe Descola, but also Bruno Latour and others say we in the past 200 years really have externalized nature. So in our culture, nature is the more something is seen outside of our daily life. And the example that I typically give is, if you think about your own parents or grandparents, perhaps they knew more plant species, animal species, they rate the weather better than you. So a lot of the natural phenomena are much more ingrained in previous generations that we have today. So we're losing this link with nature. And I think the question that we try to ask ourselves in our project, how can we cultivate nature again? If culture is something that is now the opposite of nature, how can we try to reestablish a culture, if we see design as a cultural act, that also try to internalize natural phenomena and try to reconnect with nature. It might be a bit theoretical, but we'll try to also show this in different examples. And the way we are doing that, maybe 3 things that we try to do in projects, but also in teaching and in research, is first is like site engagement. How do you engage with the site? How can you look better? What Jürgen was saying about looking at what is already there. But there are, of course, different realities. There are multiple realities of looking at the site. So it is also about looking at non-human realities, looking at natural processes, looking more detailed, go walking and using the senses, and also how, as a landscape architect, drawing is very much an important element of this practice. Is also drawing the existing situation is something that we try to experiment with. Secondly is social engagement with groups. If we want to try to install a project, then for us you have the material component, the design, what you make, what you build, what you plant, but there is also the social component. Will people adopt and will they engage with the site? And we always try to also in the project to think, who will be the users of this park and how can we install these nature engagements or these nature relations? And there are some examples of workshops with children, of working on ecological literacy or community action. So there's a lot of community groups already in the city, but also associations or youth movements that already are concerned about similar things that we are typically concerned about. So mobilizing this social capacity and energy in projects helps you to make sure that also after things will continue happening. And then lastly is about composition and design, and we are very much convinced that ecological design has also important aesthetic. There is an aesthetic. The design can also make people go engage, maybe be more fascinated by nature. So the design is an important element in trying to look into materials, textures, compositions that reinforce these experiences. And I will explain it based on 7 projects. Just getting the timer here, so I'm not going over time. 7 projects, and the first one that I want to show is Cohabitat Brussels. This is more part of what I'm doing my PhD research, but I think it's interesting to show before we dive into the more concrete realizations. This is an atlas that we are making, so Cohabitation Atlas for Brussels, as a reaction on more traditional ways of representing nature in the city. And I think you might know these are 2 maps for Brussels, but I'm pretty sure Vienna has very similar maps, having more like a nature or a green strategy map with like what kind of corridors that we want, and with some arrows and giving some sort of framework for developing nature or green in the city. And on the other hand, this is more the legal status, the zoning, the green zoning plan, what types of spaces have heritage or just nature protection status. And I think this atlas, what we wanted to do is this is a very human conception of nature in the city. It's like drawing where green is. But of course, if our idea was, how do animals live in the city, and how can we come to a representation of non-human life in the city? And of course, these graphs are used also for real estate, for soft mobility, for so these have also political connotations that are, of course, very human-centered in a way. So we were trying to challenge that and looking for ways of having a different type of representation. And what we did is we used citizen science. We have in Belgium this observation platform, observations.be. People can take pictures of animals, birds, so they see and they can upload. I think you have similar systems. There are multiple used, and that gives us, for Brussels, over a time frame of 15 years, 2 million data of animals observed in the city that we thought is very interesting. Many ecologists, biologists not necessarily find this data interesting because it's not systemic. So it doesn't say anything about the real populations in the city, but for us, what was interesting, it shows that this is an encounter between a human being doing an observation of an animal. So for us, it tells us something about nature experiences in the city, let's say. So this is, for instance, the map of the foxes that are observed in Brussels. And there are many, many others. So these are all the main, from the 10 most taxonomic groups, the 10 most observed animals in Brussels. And the question is like, okay, we had like hundreds of observation maps with all these dots. Like, how can you come to some sort of framework to organize this? And what we did is we sit together with the administrations, ecologists, try to interpret this data and develop 12 narratives. So 12 cohabitation narratives. And from these narratives, we develop mappings. For example, each narrative is just an example. It's some sort of representation of a specific problem of cohabitation in the city. For instance, the hedgehog. We try to somehow put it in a catchy phrase that already goes towards a narrative, like the hedgehog pushbacks, the sparrow safe spaces, the swift summer residences, to talk about some specific problem that is linked to, of course, multiple other species or urban dwellers. For instance, the common swift, so it's like a black swallow type of bird, which you perhaps also have in Vienna. It's a typical urban dweller, and it's very specific because it never stops flying, also while sleeping. And it's a migratory bird. It's a very small bird, but it flies all the way to the south of Africa for hibernation, and then comes in summer in Brussels, but in many, many European cities for reproduction. And here you can see where these common swifts are located. And on the right, we made a map with the age of the buildings, because of course these birds typically are taking advantage of the holes and the type of details of the roof in old townhouses, like early 20th century, late 19th century townhouses. So there is a whole corridor of spaces around Brussels, houses that are being renovated, where a lot of these cavities of these birds are disappearing. Also, another storyline in this narrative is if you look at the Cinquantenaire Park. This is like an arch that was built for the 100th birthday of Belgium last century. We will have the 200th birthday in some years. So you can see this arch here, and here you have the second biggest colony of common swifts. And one of the things that we found out looking into this data is that one of the biggest festivals that was held in this park is like in the middle of the reproduction period of this common swift. And only just to state that these realities, because this big colony of swifts, this reproduction in these arcs, is not documented, is not used, is not mobilized in decisions on how we use public space, on how. So here there's quite a conflict of keeping this colony here and not disturbing them in very vulnerable periods. Then we have similar stories. So the sparrows. The sparrow is, you can see this graph, has a drop of 95% in Brussels. All over Europe, sparrows populations went very much down, but in Brussels, 95% in 20 years is like really, really a lot. But there's only one space where we found more sparrows, and it's a bit light, but this is a pedestrian, an alley in the center of Brussels that was pedestrianized. It used to be a car, like a car access in the center, and now it's a hotspot of house sparrow. So that's the only place like they put suddenly a lot more house sparrows. And why? Of course, if you see the section of the streetscape now, there are some shrubs with a lot of berries and grains that they like. There's also these old townhouses have balconies and a lot of small-scale landscape that they like. And there's the urban furniture, and of course, many people go there for lunch. So there's bread crumbles, etc. Yeah, there's some sort of combination between the mobility policy and the growth or the rise of sparrow populations in southern areas in the city. And then the last story that I'm going to explain is the hedgehog. So the hedgehog, you can see the hotspots is more in the periphery of Brussels. And when we were looking into this narrative, it's about small terrestrials, small mammals. And we zoomed in on one space, which was really also a very much a hotspot of hedgehog observations. And you can see here all the orange dots are basically dead collisions. So it's car collisions with hedgehogs. So most of these. So what we learned is for most observations for sparrows, these are living sparrows. But for hedgehogs, all these 90% of observations are dead hedgehogs. So it's also about environmental justice and some questions about. This is a hotspot of hedgehogs collisions with cars. Why hedgehogs like big houses with maybe chicken in the garden or cats in the garden, big gardens that they can meander through. But here you have also the ringway, the motorway of Brussels. It's very isolated. There's a lot of car traffic. And also this model of big townhouses in the periphery, in the urban periphery, is also a very car-dominated model. So it's some sort of a Molotov cocktail that combines these two elements, big gardens with a lot of cars, and then you get this. So this is also just to show that this type of mapping helps to reveal images, realities of the city that are not non-existing today in urban planning or in design or maybe in small naturalist cycles. But and then also here, what we try to do is we made a map showing more a territorial section. Then you have this life cycle of the hedgehog, which in hibernation. Then when they wake up, then they go looking for mates. Then they have the mating, they're raising the young, and then so there is some sort of life cycle, and they're only awake in between, let's say March, April until this September. And of course, if you see below, there is a graph of the amount of hedgehogs that was brought in the care center. Brussels has one animal care center, and there you can see when they are looking for mates and when the young leave the nest are like very clear tipping points for hedgehog collision. So there's also a temporality linked to this problem, which also means maybe easy to solve if behavior would also be adapted in certain periods of the year. So just to show 3 examples, there are 12 narratives. We are trying to develop this atlas, but it gives you a different way of looking at reality, a different way and also more critical way of how we as human beings conceptualize nature, which is not necessarily how nature would see themselves in the urban context. Then I run to more concrete projects. I start with something very small, which when we started the office, we made a small garden, a bit in the periphery, close to Antwerp. And it used to be an old diamond factory. It's the refurbishment of one single-story house where we really wanted to, and you can see it a bit, there are all these forest patches, and we really wanted the house to completely disappear in this forest. So there's also like a patio, but also typically the gardens, people want to fence their garden, so what we really wanted to do is have something open and just have the house in the landscape without very strict boundaries. And then the intervention, our idea was to really stick to human activities, or the activities of the terrace and coming in and what we usually have in a house, to really connect it to the building itself with one single gesture, which is like an oil stain around the house. And that would accommodate people coming in, and then you have the front door, then you have the terrace, and then all the fluxes that they wanted to incorporate, and the rest of the garden would be free of any construction or hardscape. So this is how it looked in the end. It's quite a big jump from the Brussels city to the small garden, but I think it's also just to show the sheer diversity of projects, and I think here also where you try to navigate between the biggest story, but also just answering to the needs and the desires of a client, right? So these are some pictures, and also, this is the parking lot for this car. It's a bit of periphery development, so this is also quite car oriented. So you can see that also here we just want to very minimally intervene so that it looks that it all kind of disappears in the surrounding landscape. The next project, then we go to much more urban projects, is the Flagey Square, also the picture you saw earlier in Brussels. We only started our office 1 month, and then we were selected for this competition, and then we won it, and then we could execute. It's a project together with Follow Architects. So it was really nice for us to start the office with such an iconic space, but this is in Brussels the biggest square. It's a very famous event square, but also a very nice space. And it was designed by Lutz and Partners, the German office, and only delivered in 2008. So it's very recently. And also this was, people might know it, it was published in all the books about landscape architecture. It was a very iconic project because it's very typical for that time. Cars were put under the ground. There's like a high quality floorscape of nice paving pattern, blue stone, some trees, a very nice long bench on the edge, and then these fountains. And there's indeed, it works quite well. Children are playing there in summer. Only thing is it's very mineral and it's very hot in summer. And this is something that was the competition brief, like how can we add more green on the site? And our idea was to really try to stick to the design of Peter Lutz, but somehow add a green layer. I understood later also that the initial team also envisioned it to be much more green. And we had like 3 concepts. First of all, we have this long bench, this red bench. We really wanted to unpave the backside and green the backside, because this was the only area where there was many activities. So you have the circus, you have 2 markets a week. You have also the Christmas market. You cannot imagine what is all happening. There is every week other stuff, sometimes at the same time, which means every square meter is mapping that the simultaneous functioning of several activities would work, was the key element. Also, there's almost no full soil. Everything is built on top of a parking, but the parking has 1 layer, and then below there is a stormwater basin. Because this is in the lower part in Brussels, there's a lot of problem with flooding. There's a huge stormwater basin, and because of the volume of this underground construction, they needed to add 1.5 meters of soil to keep the volume down, because otherwise it would be pushed up. So that was a bit the luck that we had, because there was like 1.5 meters of soil, so we could use it as well for the planting. So the second strategy is making big green patches around the existing trees, because the existing trees were quite suffering also from the heat, do not really had small planting pits and grills. And then we add some solitary trees on the square. So this is what in the end the plan looks like of the green interventions. It looks very chaotic, I know, but it's also, I mean, trying we had really to negotiate every square meter, make it work with turning circles of trucks. And so it was really a challenge for us. We had a concept in the beginning, and then there were a lot of constraints, and then the concept changed and you adapt. And so it's also in that sense, working in an existing context is sometimes very, very complex and easy and difficult to also keep the design concept alive. But in the end, it's 2,000 square meters of green. And for each of these zones, so there's 1.5 meters of soil. And the idea was really to make this soil lively. And from the beginning, we said, for us, these are no decorative plants. We're not putting in penicetum. And no, we want it to be a biotope. So for us, it needs to be diverse, have different layers, and also be lively. It can change over time. Plants can maybe move, so it's more like making biodiversity islands, let's say. Secondly, also the water runoff. So this is a scheme, a modeling of the rainwater runoff. Now I think almost 50% of the square now goes directly to one of these gardens. But the challenge was to not have too much water going to one planting zone. Because from the moment you have 3 times more the surface than the plants, then we know that we might have trouble with too much water for the planting. So, but in the end, it's very much an added value. We also looked into to have some variety in the planting, mainly because there was a study for biodiversity for this part of Brussels, where they stated that for pollinators and for small birds, they had a lack of food in late summer. And so we tried to also meet these requirements to have some plants that that could foresee this food demand. So these are some images from the project itself during construction and then after construction. So you can see in the beginning they fenced it with these wooden ganivelles, and then afterwards were taken away. Now there's like a steel border. But they really, what I kind of like is that it also kind of explodes from the green that is in there, and that is also not necessarily only the plants there were some planted, but also large parts were seeded. That it's also interesting that because of the size and because of the scale in the project, that they could have a less polished identity, let's say. And yeah, I think for the square itself, it's a huge difference now, also in terms of use around these planting zones, give much more soft identity, and the trees are also doing well, so it's we hopefully get more shade in the near future. The next project is the Floralis in Ghent. This is a garden show that is used is organized every 4 years in Ghent. And we were asked to design a temporary garden for this garden exposition. Of course, the Florali in Ghent, they have very horticultural tradition. So this is usually where they show, I think, like 30 varieties of rhododendron. And so it's a very plant exposition. So yeah, we were like, okay, we're much more thinking on a different level of doing something there. So our idea was to make a big forest and in this velodrome. And it was also the remembrance year of Jan van Eyck, which is a famous painter born in Ghent. And this is the Mystic Lamp, it's the most famous painting. And what is interesting, so it was a remembrance of that painter. So we wanted to do something in terms of composition, because this composition is super strong with the sun in the middle and then the open meadow and then the green. So it's some sort of symmetrical. But also in terms of planting, Jan van Eyck, there is a whole book about all the plants that are on this painting. He traveled to Italy and he had a lot of notes on what types of plants that he had. And so in the beginning we imagined, okay, we're going to look into these notes of Van Eyck, and then we will have all these amazing plants that are also on this painting. But there are palm trees, there are so many exotic things on it. That we thought, yeah, that's maybe a bit difficult. And also because our client was the province, and the province is really pushing the different provinces in for the Flemish government, and they are pushing like biodiversity, indigenous planting. So they were like, no, we cannot invest in this exotic plant, so it needs to be indigenous. We were like, okay, fair enough. And also because we didn't want to be a throwaway project, like many expositions. So we also imagine it to have an afterlife, which I will come back to. So this is a picture of the realization where you can see it. So you can see a bit like the composition is not maybe super clear, but in the middle we wanted to make an open space. So it's a big sand pit in the middle with this sun. And then we wanted to have some sort of mystic character. There was some smoke, there were bird sounds. The idea here is that in Flanders, so the north of Belgium, we have 6 different typologies of forests that we would like take these typologies of forest and then in that sense be able to have indigenous groups of trees that we used. And you can see also, we really wanted to use all our money because it was limited in budget for the trees. So we only had like rubble to stabilize the trees. So there was no money left to do any kind of design detail. And if you would have go to the Floralis, this exposition, all the other stands are like super polished. So the difference in aesthetic was quite shocking. Also for many older people that visited this, but which made it also quite interesting in a way. So you can see here the roughness of the design was for some people quite shocking. But yeah, in the end, that way we managed to have a lot of trees and to have the experience to the fullest. And it was also opened by the Belgian king, Philippe, who was also, Mathilde was not really approving, so it looked a bit strange, but still like a very nice project for us. And then afterwards, during the project, and thinking back about engagement, we people could subscribe to become a godfather or a godmother of the trees, and then they could leave their name, and then they were invited to the replantation action. So all of these trees were, after the expo, put into a glass house, and then when it was planting season, and almost all trees survived, we planted them in one of the provinces' forestation projects. So, I mean, in that sense, the money was also well spent. It's still, the trees are still there, and so overall interesting project. The next one is Arenberg mining site in France. This is a competition, Europan competition that we won in 2021 also, which is very nice, but it was not about this site, it was also in the north of France. And then we were put into competition with the 3 winners, and we associated one of the teams, and then got this very nice assignment to work on an old mining site. People that love cycling, in Belgium a lot of people love cycling, but perhaps know Paris-Roubaix, the cycling course. And here there is the Trouée d'Arenberg, which is very famous, cobblestone route in that competition. And then, you can see here, this is the old terril. So mining sites also have a small hill where they put all the rubble of the extraction. And then you have here the old mining pits, and then also Arenberg is also very nice because the heritage in terms of mining, housing, etc. is very intact and very beautiful. And you can see here how it looked like earlier. So you see already this hill is now gone. So they used it to build a motorway. So this is now more a pit than a hill, but this is how it looked like. And I think in this competition, what is interesting for us is this site is it's in the north of France, really in a corner, and this is a difficult region. So from the political perspective, what they want to do is make it very nice, attract a lot of economy, invest a lot of money, and then looking into new recreations and I think from our side, we thought this mining site is part of a mining heritage. And there are many, many mining sites. So this is the Belgian border here. So the river is the Belgian border and it goes down. And there is a lot of nature. This is really an incredible nature site. And from our perspective in Belgium, it's almost completely built. So there's very little spots where you can really go for 1 day or 2 days in nature. And we tried to put the cursor also on the amazing opportunities of seeing this also as some sort of gateway for people to experience the wider region and to look and to go into the amazing nature that these sites host. But also on the site itself, this is a cross section, and here you can see the projection of the old terril, and now it looks like this. But if you go there, it's really amazing because it's like a moon landscape. It's all these old schists is very dark, and then you have these pioneer plants, these birches, and so it's amazing. And it's also in terms of biodiversity, the whole site hosts a really amazing set of species. So also on the site itself, we said, okay, this experience of nature already starts when you come into this site. So this is not only about mining heritage, it's also about ecological heritage and the links with the biodiversity on the site. So we went together also with inhabitants on the site. There are still many people that have grandparents or parents that used to work on the mines, and also we tried also to put this topic of ecology a little bit on the agenda when doing these walks on the site, not only talking about the mining heritage. So we first made a master plan, had some topics. I will not go deeper into that. And then second, after the master plan, we are now making a proposition for the design of one part. So here is the terril, but we are now focusing on the lower part to really make a design of how people and visitors would enter. And in the back, here there comes the event space, and then in the back we are recreating parts of this old railway yard, because today this is really all meadowland that is intensively maintained, so less interesting. So we want to recreate these historical conditions that can also help us to make a nice historical space or ecological space. And here you can see the different layers that we are focusing on. So there is a heritage trail that you can experience most of the buildings. Then there is a functional landscape. We're also looking into water management on the site, but there's also some logistics to be integrated. And then lastly, there's also this mining and industrial landscape. There's some sort of the topography and the line work and the aesthetics. We also have this what we call tuin. It's like rubble gardens, let's say, where we use the rubble to have interesting plantings and to keep a bit of this aesthetic, because in the 70s, 80s, 90s, after the activities of the mine, they took everything out, they made everywhere grass and put some trees. So we lost a lot of these industrial qualities that could host also, in terms of plantation, interesting spaces. So this is an overview. And this is how it looks like today. So it's very monoculture in a way. And then this is the proposal. Also the discussions on putting extra trees. So yeah, we have like zones where we put tree grids in between the buildings, also as some sort of discussion with the heritage, because in France heritage is also a very important topic, and blocking perspectives on buildings. And so this is also part of some sort of negotiation, where you can see that also the backside, which is now inaccessible for public and will be, with the new bicycle track, will be also an accessible area and part of this heritage trail. The second last project is the Royal Palace in Brussels. This was a competition that we did last year to rethink the historical gardens, the front gardens of the Royal Palace in Brussels, which is located next to the Warande Park. It's in the higher part of Brussels. And it today looks like that. So it's a huge cobblestone area infrastructure. And then you have these tree gardens that are a bit sunken, but that they wanted to redesign also for this upcoming 200th birthday of the country. And what you can see, of course, today it's very monocultural, very underused, and there were some sort of 4 concepts that we wanted to push forward. First of all, the scenography. If you look at the picture, it's not really the way you enter. You see the palace and then you still have to walk for 10 minutes before getting at the gate. So we wanted to make this whole scenography of going to the palace, make it more interesting. There's obviously the type of animation on the site, adding more plant species, but also in terms of materials and making it much more lively and getting more people there. Also the historical heritage. You will see later that these front gardens have very typical French broderie gardens, so there's like geometrical figures. And we thought it was interesting to work with this reinterpretation. And then of course climate, there's definitely a water challenge in this area, but also a heat island, etc. So our design, you can see it a bit here. So this is the palace. We have these 3 gardens, which we conceptualized 2 of them, the 2 outside, as an orchard. I will later explain why, but these are 2 orchards. And then in the central one is a water garden. In the front, we make a big square, And then left and right, we make two, we call like small urban forests, but small zones with dense planting. And also the backside of the park, which is today a bit weak. We wanted to make a decent backside with more trees that also could make somehow this frame of this space. And for these gardens, so you can see this, it's also of course historical heritage in a way. And we wanted to transform it in an orchard. Why this orchard? Because we thought, like apple trees, they don't become very big, so we will keep the visibility of the facade. We can also plant them in a geometrical figure, which we thought would work very well with the more geometric historical figure, but also giving the coloring, and we thought it would be very nice to see it as a way of connecting with the people, with the visitors, but also inhabitants, because of course it gives like a seasonal dynamic to this space. There will be flowers, there will be apples, and also having these meadows on this orchard. I think Belgium has also a very rich history about pomology, which is the knowledge of breeding apples. And now today there are like 5-6 apple species that we are all eating. But in the past, like every region, every village had its own apple species. So it's also very interesting to have this narrative. And this is the grounds where the Belgian Revolution was fought. So it's also getting nutrients from this soil, which is so layered with different cultural and identities and significations, is also very symbolic in a way. So we thought this was an amazing space of engagement. Also, we added 2 slopes so that these gardens could be opened. Today they are completely inaccessible. So we wanted to also make them accessible during weekends, in summer, when there is no activity in the palace, because the king does not live there. It's just for protocol or ceremonial functions. And then in the center we make a clairière, an open space where people could sit. And we thought there are no spaces like that in Brussels today. So it would be a very amazing place to go and read a book. And also the difference of looking at the palace from above and then sitting in the garden, looking from below under this orchard, is a very different experience, which we thought is interesting. And so you can see here a bit the dynamic that we imagined that could also help developing what I talked about in the beginning, this culture of nature in the city. And also orchards are of course also very interesting for biodiversity, because a lot of species can also benefit from that. So this is then the image, how it would look like, where we have this square, which we will keep or propose to keep as an activity square, this urban forest, and then the 2 orchards, which we thought would not block too much the view, but still gives like a very interesting green suckle to approach. And then during this flowering period would give like amazing image, and people go there for tourism would be definitely also working. But in the end, we were from the 18th second, so we didn't win. And one of the important reasons also is because the accessibility of the gardens, and also planting in the gardens, planting trees, which was also forbidden in the brief, was also for the security environment around the royal working. Not acceptable, so it's a bit of a pity, a missed chance, let's say, but still like very interesting project where we try to combine these social and ecological ambitions. And then to close, this is also another competition. Since we have only our offices for 4 years, it's sometimes hard to wait for realization. So that's why you see often a lot of competitions. Definitely, because if you're part of architectural projects, then it takes even longer to get things built and get nice realizations. But let's hope that it changes soon. So this last project, Paradis du Vivant in Geneva, is also Europan competition that we won. And this was the idea of coming up with a concept to animate the city throughout summer with a mobile installation. So what they wanted to do is make a mobile installation, a green installation, that is moving from site to site and activating different public spaces that are today very mineral. So what they wanted to do is show to the public, like, okay, if we would add more green, it could be much more lively, and during summer there are also less cars on certain areas, so they could maybe eliminate some of the car parkings for a temporary, in a temporary way. So we thought it was very interesting, and they also had many examples of, there was a famous example in Groningen, I think, or Leeuwarden, where they have these small bucks that they put by hand from location to location. But of course, here in Geneva, these distances are really, really big, and also the sites are really big. We, for this mobile installation, and you can see, and it has to travel every week. So there's no time to really set up something. It should be immediately working. So what we proposed is like making big wagons, also because we know the problems that we often have with trees and bucks, that they dry out in summer and or they need a lot of water. So we this is like a typical truck trailer, but like a low truck trailer, which is a bit of the entity what we are working with. So they are mobile. And we make different landscape typologies and making vast types we took our inspiration from the different amazing landscapes around the region of Geneva to make more forested landscapes and more river valley landscapes, and come to some sort of set of wagons that we can use to make different compositions that are also very flexible. So they can be used, we can put them one another, they can be adapted to very different spatial conditions. And also 2 of these wagons are more, have small canopy, and there we still put a lot of pots with trees and plants. And then from the moment we come on a certain spot, we can unload, having also different furniture and flower pots or planting pots together with these big wagons, and in this way try to have an interesting configuration. You can see this is a square, this is a rotonde, where we can put these wagons in a different configuration, and there's also one weather element that we can connect to a rain pipe. And in this way, the idea is that this installation can easily be set up and installed. What we thought was interesting, because the idea of having these wagons somehow also came from the typical parades that we have, like if you have festivities, and sometimes you have large constructions during festivity periods. So the idea of the parade was something, the parade, very interesting. And here you can see, it's for landscape architects, easy thing to do. It's like typical green roof detail that we make. We just make a big green roof, and we can easily also make sure that these trees are perhaps in better health conditions than putting them in individual bucks. But more importantly, this idea of these, beside the fact that they have impact when they are standing, for us the idea was perhaps more that they have impact when they are moving. Because if they would all move through the city together, we imagined that it could be like a moment on Friday evening, 4 o'clock, everyone stops working, and then like people are walking and cycling next to these big wagons with trees that are moving, and this spectacle is maybe more interesting. And if we could do it every week in summer, it could be an amazing dynamic, let's say. Thank you very much.